What am I going to do when it comes to Manta? Now, even though nothing I say is financial advice, I'm clearly aware that as of right now, when it comes to the hypothetical idea of $5, Manta's over 55 times lower than that. Totally aware of that. But my perspective is this. Even though in the grand scheme of things, it may not necessarily seem like such a good thing, my kind of perspective is that, sure, I mean, if my intention is to exit, I'm not going to be such a fan of this situation. But because hypothetically I am trying to dollar cost average, I'm not going to necessarily be complaining too much because I even saw Manta back in October, so around 2 months ago basically. It did reach a new all-time low. Not a new all-time high, a new all-time low. Which again, may seem like kind of not such a good thing. But my perspective is that if I'm just going to use a different example, if for whatever reason Cardano's native token called ADA reached a new all-time low tomorrow or something like that. I mean, who knows? I'm just saying. If let's say it did that for whatever reason, am I going to complain if I am trying to dollar cost average? I don't think I would necessarily complain. But again, that's a totally different situation. But Manta, because it's not as popular as Cardano, it reaching a new all-time low, sometimes it's not really talked about that much, but I don't know why I would necessarily complain about that. Like, again, if for whatever reason Bitcoin, let's say in a hypothetically completely make-believe scenario, reach a new all-time low tomorrow, am I saying I would dollar cost average or not? Like, that's just kind of my perspective. But even besides that, Manta currently market cap is around 40 million, so it's down by quite a lot. However, this market cap right here is actually over 10 times lower than where it once was back in January, which was around 500 million. And I don't think that was even an altcoin season. So if for whatever reason the sentiment when it comes to altcoins and Manta returns back to its January levels, like again, right now we're over 10 times lower than that. That's just kind of my perspective. However, still even despite all this though, Manta current amount of holders is still around 200,000. I mean, that's kind of impressive. I would expect maybe below 100,000, considering how it's basically hovering around that all-time low range as of right now. But still, it's holding up pretty okay, I guess, in terms of the amount of holders. So at least that's something I could, look at, I guess. However, even besides all that, why do I like Manta fundamentally? Now, let me explain, basically kind of in simple terms, what I think about Manta in terms of the use case. Now, Manta, or should I say the Manta network, it offers two networks, right? The first is Manta Pacific, and the second is Manta Atlantic. In no specific order, but I'm just saying. Now, if I take a look at Manta Pacific, it supposedly is the modular layer 2 ecosystem on Ethereum for Ethereum virtual machine native ZK applications. Now, people may be thinking, okay, what does this even mean? ZK stands for zero knowledge. And if we take a look at zero knowledge technology, it, for instance, can allow for greater scalability and hypothetically enhancing privacy. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that. But even besides that, if we take a look at layer 2s for Ethereum more specifically, why do I think it's pretty cool as well? Well, it's because if we take a look at a layer 2 for Ethereum, it basically kind of allows Ethereum to be enjoyed, but then not necessarily, I think, having to deal with some of the drawbacks that historically we've seen with Ethereum. For instance, arguably the gas fee issues that we see with Ethereum, it's just kind of way too high, right? I think sometimes, but even besides that, also I take a look at the arguable scalability issues when it comes to Ethereum. So basically kind of like mitigating some of that, but then still allowing Ethereum to be enjoyed. But even besides that, there are a lot of Ethereum layer 2s out there. I mean, come on, right? I mean, there's so many. Even Coinbase has a layer 2. But I'm saying, I just wanted to mention that. However, the thing is, the second network, which is called the Manta Atlantic, well, again, it's no specific order, but I'm saying the second one I want to talk about is Manta Atlantic because previously I explained Manta Pacific. Now, Manta Atlantic is supposedly the fastest ZK, which again stands for zero knowledge, but again, it is allegedly, or should I say supposedly, the fastest zero knowledge layer 1 chain on Polkadot. Now, Polkadot, I find this pretty interesting because even though Polkadot hasn't really done much in the past couple of years, basically, but at the same time, Polkadot is basically trying to connect blockchains together. It's focused on something called interoperability. Now, in case someone may be wondering what is that, let me explain it real quick. I mean, I'm just going to explain lacking interoperability, and I think it's going to better kind of explain Polkadot, right? If we take a look at how there's many blockchains out there, many networks, because a lot of them are independent of one another, they can't kind of freely interact with one another in a lot of cases. And as a result, if that is the case, they arguably do lack something called interoperability. But then again, Polkadot is basically focused on connecting blockchains together. However, even besides all that, let me actually explain something called Kusama and its relation to something like Polkadot. And I think later on, it's going to better help understand what the whole vibe when it comes to Manta is about. Because if we take a look at Kusama, it is the canary network to Polkadot. Now, basically, if we take a look at Kusama as a canary network, what does that even mean? Well, usually from what I can see, developers, they typically start off with Kusama if they want to do something, and then later on they move on to like Polkadot. The reason why some developers out there just don't automatically gravitate towards something like Polkadot and just launch a project there is because arguably it is, hypothetically from what I can understand, a little bit more economically friendly when it comes to renting building space on Kusama when compared to Polkadot, and also at the same time, supposedly it's easier to make changes on. So that's why, again, some developers out there, they kind of start off with Kusama. Then later, after they kind of test it out and all that, they later move on to something like Polkadot. But they don't necessarily have to, though. I mean, there's projects on Kusama too, but I'm just saying that's just kind of the vibe that I see sometimes. Now, this is going to make sense as to what I think about something like Manta because, or should I say, let me rephrase that. It's going to help better explain the whole vibe when it comes to Manta because now that we've heard about Manta Atlantic and as well as Manta Pacific, Manta actually has something called the Calamari network, which again is basically a canary network to Manta, right? And I just explained before, basically what a canary network is. So kind of like Kusama to Polkadot, but in this case, it's kind of like the vibe of, Calamari, but to Manta. But even besides that, when it comes to Manta, it does have that ocean theme. Again, Manta Atlantic, Manta Pacific. We take a look at the Calamari network. But yeah, besides that point, when I take a look at something like Manta, I mean, I don't think it is necessarily going to become the most popular project out there, but it doesn't have to, right? I mean, arguably, like not every single project out there is going to hypothetically become the most popular. Like personally, I don't think Polkadot is ever going to become the most popular project out there. And something like Manta kind of heavily relies a little bit on the popularity of Polkadot, right? So then how is that even going to overtake Polkadot, let alone become number one in this space? I just don't think so. But does it really need to? I mean, again, I personally hypothetically don't think so. Like, sure, it's around 55 times lower than $5, but is Ethereum even over 5 times lower than 10 grand? No, it's not. Is Bitcoin even over 4 times lower than 300 grand? No. And it's actually never even reached 300 grand, but I'm just saying. Like Manta currently is over 10 times lower than what it was back in January of 2025 in terms of market cap. But even besides that, actually, at the hypothetical idea of $5, the market cap considering current circulating supply would be around 2.3 billion. Is that such an outlandish figure? I don't know about that, but it doesn't seem that way to me. But even besides that point, when I take a look at this altcoin space, I'm never going to be able to know when exactly there's going to be an altcoin season or not. I cannot control that. But personally, what I am doing is just dollar cost averaging once a month to just kind of hypothetically maybe sort of preemptively maybe prepare. That's what I like to call it. If let's say there maybe even is an altcoin season, but yeah, who knows? I mean, only time will tell. And now I'm not telling anyone to do anything, but I literally just dollar cost average once a month. I don't do any more than that. I don't do any less than that. That's all I do. I mean, again, that's all I'm doing actually, but I'm just still staying patient. It is what it is. But again, Manta, I'm still a fan of the fundamentals, and sure, it's over 10 times lower than where it was back in January in terms of market cap, but I'm not necessarily complaining, but that's just my point of view. I'm still going to wait and see what happens, and personally, again, I'm just staying patient, waiting, and that's about it. But I just wanted to make an updated video when it comes to Manta and talk about my thoughts on it, because a lot of people like to say, oh, did I forget about Manta? No, I did not forget about it. But yeah, that's pretty much about it. I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you all have a nice day. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch you on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.